free. We'll still be letting people in from the waiting room, but I apologize for the little note up here. I'm not quite sure how to get rid of that, but I guess that's one of our technical difficulties. But on the screen, I'll cover everything that's on the screen. I just wanted to welcome everyone. I'm Babette Henderson. I'm the Senior Director of Alumni Engagement for the Feinberg School of Medicine. And I'd like to welcome you to our Women in Medicine panel. Before we get started, I want to cover a couple housekeeping items that are on the screen. If you want to ask a question of any of us or our presenters, please use the Q&A chat feature below. Please use that instead of the raised hand, as our moderator will be posing the questions to the panelists. We encourage you to use speaker view versus gallery view to view the meeting, and you will be muted throughout the meeting. And if you have an unstable internet connection, you can increase your speed and connectability by turning off any other applications or internet connections on your other devices. Right now, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the event, Dr. Kavitha Gandhi. She's the co-chair of the Women in Medicine Subcommittee for the Medical Alumni Association Board. She'll introduce our panelists and moderate our question and answer session after the presentation. Dr. Gandhi?
Thank you, Babette. Good evening. I am Kavitha Gandhi, a dermatologist by training and an alumna from Feinberg's class of '98. As a member of the Medical Alumni Association Board and co-chair of its Women in Medicine initiative, I'm grateful to have this opportunity to moderate a discussion amongst this dynamic and accomplished group of speakers on this panel this evening. Before I introduce them to you, I want to share with you a personal tale from very early on in my career that ignited my interest in advocating for change against implicit gender bias and for gender equity in medicine. In the early days of my second year of dermatology residency, as my fellow residents and I filtered into the conference room and gathered around the oblong table where we sat every Wednesday afternoon with our department chair to be pimped during grand rounds, the senior resident who sat next to me struck up a conversation with me. He very pointedly asked, "Kavitha, have you thought about starting your job search?" "Why?" I asked. "Well," he said, "the other members of your class are all men, so they're going to get job offers easily. And let's be honest here, you don't have the typical attributes that men find attractive of women dermatologists. You're not tall, blonde, or beautiful, so you're going to have a hard time finding a job." I was speechless for a moment and bothered. But as our chairman walked in just then and our grand rounds began, I was thwarted from responding to these troubling words. And I had some choices. Certainly I could dismiss them as one person's foolish opinion, but I got to thinking, was there bias rooted in these statements? Did his words reflect systemic bias? And weren't just as many female dermatologists graduating from residency positions around the country as male dermatologists? Was there a certain standard of beauty applied to women to make quite literally a more attractive hire? I'm not sure I have all the answers to these questions, but I do know that sharing stories such as these is the first step to effect change for gender equity. I was very viscerally motivated to ask myself then, as I ask myself and I ask you today and every day, what can we do to change this order of things, to impact gender equity? And frankly, I actually use a very simple tool. It's a 10-step plan, and I did not come up with this. The American College of Physicians actually has a list of the top 10 things that you can do to impact gender equity in medicine. I have found myself frequently referring to this manifesto of sorts. Briefly, this 10-step plan encourages each of us to 1, advocate, 2, amplify other women's accomplishments as we are doing today, 3, celebrate and honor and support positive experiences and allies in this goal. 4, engage everyone to make gender equity a priority. 5, help and sponsor each other. 6, measure, which means create metrics of gender inclusivity. 7, mentor. 8, promote practices that reduce biases. 9, respect others. And 10, share and solicit advice and secrets of the trade. This simple list is a welcome reference for me, and tonight we will be promoting many of these 10 action items to impact gender equity. I'm grateful for the Women in Medicine initiative, which has provided me the opportunity to find ways to promote these things. One of the events that we typically host every year is the Alumni Tea, held every April during Alumni Weekend. Due to the pandemic, we weren't able to host that this year, so here we are in a virtual format holding this discussion. So let's start by celebrating, honoring, and supporting this esteemed group of speakers we have today. After we hear from each of our speakers, we will field questions from our audience. We invite you to type your questions and comments, so please join in into the chat function and to direct them to the Q&A, as Babette mentioned. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Dr. Prem Butchu-Green holds a doctorate in physical therapy and an MBA from Kellogg. She began her career in the cardiopulmonary inpatient setting, quickly jumping to management and then to the medical device industry, where she currently focuses on customer experience design with iRhythm Technologies. Dr. Butchu-Green.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for sharing that amazing story, which I would say I'm not surprised and definitely saddened and am empowered to be amongst a group of women here that are willing and looking to make the change that we need to remove those implicit biases that exist today. As Dr. Gandhi mentioned, I am a physical therapist by background, and I'd just like to take a few minutes to share a little bit about my very non-linear career path that she spoke of. I started my career early on, specializing in treating patients with cardiopulmonary conditions. A wonderful professor once told us that every patient is a cardiopulmonary patient, and I wanted to ensure that I was prepared to take care of patients of all populations. Early on in my career as well, being in the inpatient hospital setting, I was placed in the CVICU for my first role out of PT school. The training and the amazing staff from NUPTHMS really prepared me to use a systems thinking approach to help with clinical problem solving. I've been able to use that framework across many different points in my career. At the time of practicing in the hospital setting, I was also able to participate in a few different clinical and quality initiatives that helped really focus on patient outcomes and looked for ways to improve quality across the patients that we were treating in our CV units, and also to help with reducing length of stay. Additionally, at the time, there was an opportunity for management in the setting to be able to have some additional training in Six Sigma. I, not being very shy, decided to raise my hand and take that opportunity. That really allowed me exposure to gain additional insights, not only into the hospital setting, but also the ambulatory medical group operations. That really helped me as I transitioned my career into administration. I was eventually recruited into an internal consulting role at a health system in Downers Grove, where I was able to partner with senior leaders to really drive strategic initiatives that focused on clinical, operational, and financial initiatives that were important to the organization. Throughout my journey, I've been always very focused on learning. I've always wanted to surround myself with the brightest minds in medicine. One of the main reasons I'm here today and have loved attending these events. It's really to understand what are the current challenges that are in healthcare today, what are the newest technological advances that we can use to help streamline the care that we provide to our patients, and how can we really stay patient-centered in our focus as we're looking at making change within the way that healthcare is provided. I would surround myself by participating in different types of engagements. I would volunteer at the American Heart Association fundraisers, attend women's leadership meetings, healthcare conferences, and join boards. In fact, while I was serving on the alumni board for NUPTHMS, I had shared my experiences with a fellow board member, and he immediately wanted me to connect with his wife, who also had similar interests in operations and healthcare strategy. 6 months after connecting with his wife, she had called me to ask me if I was interested in joining her team. This leads me to where I am today in my journey. I had the opportunity to move into the digital health industry. Here, I'm really focused and excited to be partnering with physicians in the detection of significant arrhythmias to help reduce adverse events such as stroke. I support health systems in implementing our solutions and also partnering in helping them find their place in shifting towards the value-based journey. During my transition from the clinical to the administrative side, I was really able to identify some gaps that I felt I had in my skill set. I had a seat at the table, but I did not know what it was that I could bring to add extra credibility and value to the conversations that we were engaging in. So I decided to pursue an executive MBA at Kellogg. This really helped me merge not only my clinical expertise and background, but really provided me with a deeper understanding and a financial acumen to further drive some of this strategic decision-making at a system level, all the while raising two very energetic little boys. And I think none of this could have been accomplished without a village of support and, of course, my tribe of wonderful women that supported me along the way. I won't take up too much more time, but I did want to share, as I reflected on my journey, a few key learnings that I think will be important for many of you to consider as you can progress in your career journey as well. One of the common threads was brought early on to me as a child. Being a first-generation immigrant to this country, my parents brought my sister and myself here to really provide us with opportunities to grow as women. And I was eager and motivated to seek those opportunities out. A few of those key learnings that I had was, one, make sure you really understand your passion. What do you think about as you're falling asleep at night? What makes you excited to wake up in the morning and to engage with? My passion was always solving problems in healthcare. Two, go in with a beginner's mindset. I think this is really important. Don't be afraid to ask questions, to be curious, and never stop learning. Throughout my career journey, I think I have taken multiple different leaps. And along the way, I've really relied on my network to help support me and guide me through these challenging times. And lastly, I would say, be really intentional about building your brand, whether that's as a woman, a mother, a sister, a friend, or a healthcare professional. Make sure that you're able to put your best self forward today and know that everything that you encounter today will only make you better for tomorrow. A great leader once had said that there may be a glass ceiling or a cliff, but remember that glass is always meant to be broken. I just want to leave you with those last few thoughts, and I am very excited to be here with all of you today as we continue our discussions for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Butchie-Green. Our next speaker is Hazel Domingo, who began her career in nursing and subsequently completed her MMS to become a physician assistant, first in transplant and more recently at Feinberg in the hepatology service. Hazel?
I forgot to unmute myself. Thank you for the opportunity to join a panel of such accomplished and amazing women. My journey was a little bit different, and I'm also going to talk about things that are a little bit different from what Prime talked about. I was born and raised in the Philippines. Growing up, we were very poor, and I learned early on the value of being smart and how that can be a ticket to get out of poverty. If I'm smart, I can get into good schools, and I will have a good job. It was also a way to get approval from everybody. Every time I win competitions, everyone praised me. And when I lost, I felt like I lost my value as well as a person. When I was 10, my dad immigrated to the US to try to give us a better life. I continued to do well in school and was accepted into the top university in the Philippines. I was good in math, so I wanted to do accounting. But my dad said he won't pay for school unless I do nursing. And the reason was because of job security, and he knew if I became a nurse, I will get a job and I'll be able to leave the Philippines, whether to go to the US or not. At 17, I immigrated to the US. I had to start college over, unfortunately. I didn't get into nursing school until I was 19. I became an LPN at 20. I received my associate's degree and RN license at 21. and my bachelor's degree at 23. I was working full-time the whole time in order to help my parents send my siblings to college in the Philippines. That way they won't have any loans like I did. Without my mother, my female role models were mostly my aunts who were business owners and whom I worked for, my college professors, and my classmates. I attended a non-traditional college here. My classmates were a hodgepodge of mothers with young kids, housewives who are now empty nesters, people coming back from the military, and many were women who were going into nursing as a second career. I thought, wow, the women in the US can do this at any point in their lives. You can't do that in the Philippines. I started working as a nurse in the heart of Detroit. My preceptor was a Filipino nurse. She trained me and also protected me during orientation. However, once I was on my own, she couldn't do that anymore. We are all familiar with the term, the nurses eat their young, and it's true. There was a hazing period. The first few months, I always had the most difficult assignments and patients. It was unfair, but I never complained. And that was probably how I passed the test and they decided they liked me. I learned to keep my head down, don't question my manager or my schedule so much, pick up a lot of overtime to help with staffing, don't make the other nurses and nursing assistants feel threatened by being overly outspoken or correcting them when they say something wrong unless it affects the patient. While I never had issues with the nurses, there was a lot of friction between each other and between the other professions. There were many disparaging comments, a culture of tattletale, or incident reports about mistakes everyone makes without talking to the person first. While I received mostly positive feedback from everyone, to this day I still remember a particular incident. I was new to being a charge nurse and I gave myself the most difficult assignment to avoid people from complaining. But one of the older nursing assistants, who is also a woman, said in front of everyone, "You don't know what you're doing and you shouldn't be a charge nurse." Needless to say, many nurses who came after me did not last more than a year. As I worked in other units in that hospital as a float nurse, I realized it's not just a unit. It was like this everywhere. When I started working as a nurse in the CVICU, I was so scared of the nurse practitioners. I always hear people gossiping in the break room about the bad nurses. I thought I was going to be judged for not knowing things, so I avoided them. I was new and I was not part of the clique, and being shy, I didn't know how to approach them or befriend them. So instead, when I had a problem, I went to the residents because they were younger and they were more approachable. Until one day, I couldn't avoid them anymore. I had no choice but to go to the NP. And she gave me different tasks to do for the patient, and she made a comment. "That's what you get for going to the NP." Because I guess she noticed that I was always going to the residents. But in the end, her plan worked and everything was fine. But in that moment, I thought to myself, was I really scared of her for a reason, or was it my own preconceived notions that made me think she was scary? Was it my job as the younger person to befriend her, or is it her job to make me feel comfortable as the new nurse on the unit? Another part of the nurse journey is learning to deal with the interns and residents. As a young nurse, I always thought the doctor's word was the law. They are always right. But slowly I learned, just like in nursing, not everyone is perfect. I met cranky interns, condescending ones, but also so many brilliant ones and nice ones. But I've heard what people say about nurses who are too close to the doctors, or nurses who flirt with the doctors. So I was very careful not to do that. I didn't want to become a stereotype. In nursing, where only 12% are men, there's a higher percentage of male nurses in leadership positions. Is it because women sabotage each other? I myself have been guilty of expressing that I prefer to work with male managers because I feel there is less drama and they're less vindictive. But is it true? Is female aggression real? In this female-dominated field of nursing, you would think that we would thrive and have the best work environment. Instead, we can be so vicious and so toxic towards each other and our colleagues who are usually other women. I know I made nursing sound bad, but really it isn't. It's a very rewarding career. I thrived as a bedside nurse. I love the human connection. I really loved helping my patients. After a rough day, when a patient tells me I made them feel better, it's like a shot of dopamine. It's the best feeling. In nursing school, they teach you to look at the whole person, not just their physical ailments, but their emotional pain, their living situation, financial situation, family dynamics, their mental health. The health issue is just one facet. We're told to look at the whole person. So why then can't we apply these same principles when dealing with each other? Year after year, nurses are the most trusted professions, followed by doctors and pharmacists. Nurses are very proud of what they do. However, nursing has struggled with the perception that it's a second-class occupation, a woman's job. In a world where more and more women are finally encouraged to pursue careers in male-dominated fields, young women do not view nursing as an academically rigorous field. Unlike medical school, nursing schools weren't historically part of institutions of higher learning. They're now fighting back and have found strength in numbers. In nursing school, we were taught that it's vital that we are able to practice to the full extent of our education and abilities. To really elevate our profession, now everyone has to have a bachelor's degree, and now to be an NP, you have to have a doctorate. It's a breadwinner I didn't experience the full college experience, but I wanted to prove to myself, since I value being smart since I was young, that I can be, quote unquote, more than a nurse. So initially I planned to go to CRNA school, but I knew my passion was with patient care. However, I couldn't decide between family, nurse practitioner, primary care, or acute care. One day, a physician that I was working with, who is a male physician, told me to look into the PA profession. He said, just look into it. I think you will like it, and it might be the challenge you're looking for. So I looked into it and I decided to apply. All of the PAs I worked with, who also were all males, were very encouraging. They were happy and they were excited for me. They let me shadow them, wrote letter of recommendations. And without them, I consider them my allies. And without them, I would never have become a PA. In PA school, I continued to have good role models like my advisor, our professors and preceptors who were both PAs and physicians. During one of my rotations, I heard a fellow say, "What is her role here? Does she just write notes?" And I felt really bad because I knew I was there more than writing notes. The following week, the attending told me, "Wow, your notes are excellent. When you graduate, and if you need the job, just call me." That feedback from her has meant so much to me, and I still remember it to this day. And it could not have been more perfectly timed. Fast forward to my first job. I was the only PA in a team of 4 NPs. The team was infamous for attrition, but I didn't know, and I really just wanted to start working. The residents hated our service, the surgeons were mean, and one of the NPs was allegedly a bully, but I've never met her. She was on maternity leave when I started. I was saved from her partially. My preceptor encouraged me. She told me I was doing great every day. She stayed late with me. She didn't do things for me. She let me figure out on my own how to manage my time. And she gave me lots of positive reinforcement. We were always short-staffed, but I liked my coworkers and I wanted to stay. However, on my last month, I was precepted by the NP who was supposedly a bully. And within the first day, I cried. She gave me double the amount of patients I was used to taking care of and made me feel like I knew nothing. When we were running the list, she pimped me so hard until I couldn't answer any more questions. In short, I was broken. In some weird way, we became friends eventually, and she was actually a good coworker. I choked it up that, "Oh, that's just what old school nurses do. They test each other." She was even nominated as APP of the Year, with the nurses saying she's scary, but she'll make sure you know your stuff. A sentiment that I shared at the time without realizing how toxic that was. If nurses are middlemen between the provider and the patient, I feel that being a PA is also like being a middleman. But more often, I feel like an outsider. The public knows about nurses and doctors, but they don't really know about what PAs and NPs do. Sometimes we get lumped in with the doctors, but more often we're lumped in with the nurses. As a PA, there are microaggressions that you just learn to live with. It is commonplace to feel undervalued and unappreciated. For example, it's common for patients to refuse to see an NP or PA and want an MD only. There are patients who think it's okay to flirt, make comments about my appearance, or make sexual jokes during clinic visits. And you're just like, you're dying. Anyway, comments that I look young and straight out of high school, or where is the real doctor? They're very common. Just yesterday, my patient told me, no offense to you, but I knew I wasn't seeing the doctor, so I didn't want to have to drive downtown. We also experience aggression from physicians, particularly residents, although admittedly, it goes both ways. I remember in my old job, I was working a weekend shift with a 5th-year resident, and I told him, oh, they like when the APPs work the weekend because we can discharge people. I was not implying that an APP was better because we can discharge people. It just made more sense than having moonlighters do it. I guess that offended him, and he made a comment about how it's ridiculous that residents who have thousands upon thousands of hours of education are paid the same as an NP. He didn't even know I'm a PA. I was so shocked, but I just awkwardly laughed it off. Another skill I had to learn was the art of calling consults. I'm naturally soft-spoken and shy, and so before I call, I have to emotionally prepare for it. Calling a consult means you're asking another team for help, yet it seemed like every time I called, I had to prove to an angry resident, fellow, or another APP that I was not stupid and I know what I'm talking about. And of course, the nurses. They questioned everything. Why are you ordering this? What are you going to do about this? I didn't mind though, because for some it was a genuine question and I was happy to teach. But for others, they were questioning authority. They were testing me. Can I trust you? Do you know what you're doing? Those are the underlying questions. My biggest success was when I overheard the nurse telling her preceptee that if she had a question, she can go to me, that I'm a good resource and I'm approachable. That was not enough though. I had numerous role models whom I admired, but working short-staffed all the time, not being able to spend time with the patients, the constant microaggressions, feeling unappreciated by patients and physicians, being called an NP and being told it was okay because NPs and PAs are the same anyway. It all took a toll. I learned to adapt by becoming angry and aggressive, and I was miserable because that's not who I was. I realized this is why nurses eat their young. It's hierarchical bullying that's starting from the top. They are disparaged, they are powerless, they feel low on the totem pole. There is no one to empower them. They don't feel supported from the administrative side. Their own managers punish them. So they start acting out and taking it out on each other. No wonder burnout is so high across the board. But in reality, we all just want to be part of a team. We all have roles to play. We all just want our contributions to feel valued. In the corporate world, women can sometimes view each other as competition for being the token woman in the boardroom. But in nursing, in the PA profession, and soon in medicine, we will not have that problem. With more women graduating from college and almost half of medical students being women, now is the time to organize and change the culture. Now is the time for women to help other women in the field to rise up. We should aspire not to be like men, but rather embrace our own femininity and what we bring to the table. I once commented to a female resident, "Wow, you're too nice for surgery." And she told me, "You don't need to be rude to be a good surgeon." And that is our power. We can be sensitive and gentle, or outspoken and loud, and still be dependable, beautiful, smart, caring, and we can bring all these qualities to the C-suites. As I approach an age where I'm thinking about having children, I know that I will likely eventually work less hours. I recently learned that the gender pay gap is linked to having children. Women without kids earn 90% to every dollar a man makes, but those with children make much less. A woman should not have to choose between motherhood and her career. We also need to change the narrative that women's fulfillment is motherhood and only motherhood. We need to support one another and complement not just our shoes or purse and jewelry, but each other's academic and professional accomplishments. Instead of tearing each other down and feeling threatened by one woman's success, we all should celebrate each other. Because one woman's win is a win for all women. And in the end, we are in a service profession. It's not about our ego, but it's about our patience. Thank you.
Hazel, thank you for such a powerful opening statement. It was just wonderful. I want to introduce our next speaker. Dr. Haley Silver is Assistant Professor of Urology and has deep ties to Northwestern. Dr. Silver has been an enthusiastic contributor to our Women in Medicine initiatives, and I'm so grateful that she's here again tonight to speak to us. Haley.
Hi, everybody. Of course, timing. I am about to also have to multitask and feed my newborn. I have a 4-week-old baby. So while I shouldn't have to apologize for that, I'll at least warn all of you that if you hear him crying, that's why. I feel very privileged to be amongst this group of very diverse and very smart, talented women. I feel, as probably the most junior person here, that I have a lot to learn from all of you. And I hope that maybe something that I say about my story resonates with you know, anybody listening or watching today. I am just finishing my first year as an attending as a urologist here at Northwestern. And I have deep personal ties. My family has ties to Northwestern, so it feels like such an honor to be able to be here speaking. My journey has been, you know, a long journey of deciding to become a surgeon, and it started with, hi, sweetheart. Okay, I love you. It started actually with a male mentor who gave me a lot of confidence that I could become a surgeon from a very young age. And it was my first experiences as in the operating room. Okay, sorry. It was my first experiences in the operating room from a really young age that I actually had to experience what it's like for women in surgery. I grew up with all brothers, and so I felt particularly equipped to handle a lot of the male ego that is often found in operating rooms. Maybe a little bit less so now because there's more women, but certainly 10, 15 years ago, there were very few women that I ever saw as surgeons. And what I realized as I went through medical school was how my response to the comments and the stories that existed in the operating room changed. I was very enamored by surgeons when I was younger, and I definitely let a lot of what people call locker room talk roll off my shoulder. I just chalked it up to men being men. But I realized as I went through medical school and residency how those moments, especially when they're in front of other people, whether it's medical students, nurses, nurse anesthetists, patients, how that helps kind of create a lot of those microaggressions or biases that exist in the world. I have a particular memory when I was a third-year medical student, and I was in a surgery with a general surgeon, a male general surgeon, and he asked me what I was going into. And at that point, I hadn't decided between plastic surgery or urology, but I was pretty sure I was going to go into urology. And his immediate response to me was, why would I go into urology? I should really just be an OBGYN, because that's what I would know more about, in reference to the differences between our two genitalia, which, at the time I was just appalled that that was okay for him to say to me. I mean, it really wasn't, but how I responded in that moment, I realized would dictate how he would treat me for the rest of the rotation, and certainly how my peers around me and other staff would look at me. And I knew it was probably only the beginning of many other comments about me being a woman going into urology, as most people believe that we just treat men, which isn't true. And so I realized that I had to come up with responses that were both assertive, but also not off-putting, because that's often the situation, as many other women I'm sure share on this panel in various different professions, feel that you have to walk a fine line of being approachable, but also, making other people around you comfortable. And when you're trapped in an operating room for many, many hours and you can't leave, that can be a very delicate situation. And unfortunately, I've had that situation with also other women, not as many as with men, but unfortunately that does exist, where when I was a resident, I was pregnant. I had my first child when I was a junior resident, and I was the first girl in my program to have a child in over 10 years. And one of the more old school female surgeons said to me, before I had even told anybody I was pregnant, but I was pretty sick, she told me that she would have been fired if she had gotten pregnant as a resident. And I thought to myself, well, I didn't even tell you I was pregnant, but is that really the message you would have wanted to hear when you were a young female surgeon? And while I didn't really want to be the trendsetter or break that ceiling in my program, I'm very happy to say that after I had my child, there were 4 other women who gave birth in my program after me. And each time it got a little bit easier and people just got used to the idea. But I thought to myself that, as women, or as a woman surgeon, I always wanted to have other female mentors, but truth be told, mentorship for me has come in a lot of different shapes and forms, and it's been both men and women. And I've also realized that when looking for mentorship, you're not going to end up finding everything you need in one person. And I didn't realize that until probably the last few years. And I've realized that collecting mentors along the way has really attributed a lot to my success, and where I've gotten to today, because there are so many different attributes that people can offer for you. And whenever somebody has extended even the smallest hand at becoming a mentor for me, I've taken it. You never know what door that's going to open for you later. And you never know when you really need somebody in your corner advocating for you. I apologize. I think for me, the other part of my story was really having the best mentor in my mother. I realized that I am, part of a lucky few who had a mom who broke glass ceilings herself. And I grew up watching her raise me and my 2 brothers, and she would be the mom in a pantsuit running down the softball field to each one of my softball games all throughout high school. And no matter what, she always made it, even if it was at the end of the game. And so I grew up thinking that I could do anything. I can be a mom, I can have a career, I can have it all. And what I've realized is having it all can mean a lot of different things, and really it takes a village. It takes a lot of support, including, for me, a very supportive partner, somebody who has stuck with me since my freshman year of college, which I know is also kind of unique. And I think that realizing that we need to lean on people sometimes, which can often be taboo, has been something I've just had to accept and really embrace, especially being a mom and a surgeon. I also happen to be the first woman in my department to ever take a maternity leave. So I found myself as being a first a lot, and it's not always been so easy. There have been a lot of tears, a lot of very frustrating moments, and I think at the end of the day, trying to find ways to bridge gaps between the people you work around while not losing yourself and maintaining respect has been the biggest challenge for me. Like I said, I think I realized how sensitive the work environment can be. And when I talk to other young women who are thinking of going into surgery, depending on the day they catch me, I may have a different response. At the end of the day, I tell a lot of other young women, if you want to be a surgeon, do it. But just know that there are going to be some very frustrating days being a woman in surgery, whether it's your patients thinking that your medical student, who is a man, is actually the doctor and not you, or your patients calling you by your first name, which happens to me all the time. I have patients also comment about my looks, and certainly being a urologist, that can be a very sensitive situation for me. And so I think you have to have thick skin. And I don't like that it comes off kind of negative sometimes when I say that, but it's the truth. And I think the more that other women and men support each other in those moments where somebody says something inappropriate or condescending or, you know, with something with a lot of bias, we just have to speak up for one another. And hopefully with time, it will change the culture, and one person at a time, and hopefully not discourage some really talented people, especially women, from pursuing the profession that they would like. But all in all, I have to say that I am very thankful for all the mentors that I've had along the way, which, like I said, have been both male and female. And I think that I would just feel very lucky if somebody, you know, ever, when medical students approach me and ask me to mentor them, it's a very fulfilling position I find myself in now, because I still have to pinch myself and remind myself I'm no longer a resident, but that even in passing, we have the ability to influence people around us in such a positive or negative way. And that's a real responsibility that I think we all have to remind ourselves daily. And that's my story. Sorry for the baby.
Thank you, Haley. That was lovely. Finally, we have Dr. Rupal Kundu, who is Associate Dean for Admissions, Jacob R. Suker, MD, Professor of Medical Education, and also Associate Professor of Dermatology and Medical Education here at Feinberg.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Kavita, for inviting me to speak amongst this amazing panel. I've been struck by the stories, and a lot of themes resonate that I will probably circle back to. So I think there's a lot about leaning in, having a village, mentorship and sponsorship, being fiercely independent at time, and I think believing in yourself are really important messages for us to all remember. And I wanted to start by thinking about kind of a very simple question that sometimes I have to stop and ask myself, who am I, right? So who are you, right? How do you define yourself? What are the different roles and responsibilities you have? And we are so many things to so many people. If I have to answer that question for myself, I am a mother, I am a physician, I am also a dermatologist, I am a sister, a daughter, a wife, a friend, an advocate, a volunteer, a mentor, a sponsor, a citizen, a community member, a gardener, wannabe Peloton biker, a novice golfer, so many different roles that we have. And I think we often think about the juggle of life, and we all have a lot of balls that are our roles, and we can only hold two of them at the same time and hope everything else stays afloat. And so when we're thinking about kind of our trajectories, and as you've heard from the other panelists, and I will share mine momentarily, I think that we have to be able to be flexible and just, again, kind of believe in ourselves, be very present in the moments of our lives. I feel firmly we should work hard and play hard in all that we do. And for me, my story also begins with kind of heavy roots of strong family values, a real commitment to education, a mother and father who were not in medicine, but really tried to help me find my own path, and a mom who really wanted to make sure I could do everything on my own. So independent that I think at one time she said, I think I made you too independent. But being able to take care of myself, believe in myself, and to achieve all the goals in front of me. I found my way at Feinberg, and I am so honored because my first mentor, and I will say sponsor as well, is also listening here, Dr. Amy Paller, who is the chair of our department. And I think life was a little bit of a serendipity for me, but as a first-year medical student, I was pretty much set on being a pediatrician. And I think I didn't have a lot of medicine around me. I liked my pediatrician. I loved my little sisters. I think it just felt like a good fit. And so I found myself looking for research mentors in pediatrics, and was lucky enough to meet Dr. Paller, a pediatric dermatologist. I went through my medical school. I enjoyed a lot of my rotations, and I should say that I'm very, very proud alum of Feinberg, class of 2001, and went through my third year and just found myself to be a little confused and not sure if pediatrics was the right fit for me. Searched back to talk to my mentors, and Dr. Paller was like, just come do a derm rotation. And so I did that in summer of my fourth year and found myself applying to derm. And the rest is a little bit of history, but a lot of different steps along the way. I was finished my residency at the University of Illinois and was then recruited back by now chairman, Dr. Paller, and was the associate program director for the residency program, something that I had known I really wanted to do. And I think that's another message. If you are thinking about something, you really want to do something, say it. I said it in my personal statement. I said it out loud when I was interviewing. I knew what I wanted. I knew also a little bit what I didn't want, and start looking ahead, because you need a plan and other things will happen. For me, there were babies at different times of my life where maybe I had to adjust and pause. And also during residency match, we had a couples match. I was fortunate to meet my amazing life partner in my senior year of college. And he was applying for urology and I was in dermatology. And so we really had to make some strategic decisions of how to make that work. And I told him, please let me try to be a resident in the same city with you. And so we focused in on Chicago. And I said, whenever you need to make a big decision, if you want to do a fellowship, I will support you. I will be flexible. Because I'll make this work because you're doing it for me. And we really had that mutual relationship. And so a few years later, I find myself moving to New York, and my husband doing a fellowship at Sloan Kettering, and now I'm faculty at NYU. And I was, again, really lucky to have a wonderful mentor and sponsor in Dr. Paller, who allowed me to continue some of my work that I had started and invested so much time and energy and love and passion into running our Skin of Color Center of my kind of clinical and research interest at Northwestern. And I would fly back once a month with one and then two children to participate in that clinic. And I think that sometimes our pathways take like complete curves and swerves and forks and just kind of got to go with the flow. And we spent 3 wonderful years there. It was great for our family. I learned so much about myself. I learned more about dermatology, being in another space, and professionally. And then we were able to move back to Northwestern. There I was so excited because I became the residency program director, helped to also help run our medicine dermatology residency program, kept running our clinic, had another baby, and then was then about 6 years ago asked to join our admissions committee by another amazing mentor and sponsor to me, Dr. Diane Wayne. And she had interacted with me as a program director when she was a medicine program director. And I think that when you are able to work hard, to have a voice, participate and be present, and show your work ethic and your skill set, people will notice. And I was really lucky that she did. And she said, would you like to, participate in this? And so there I was. And a few years later, been able to be promoted to Associate Dean of Admissions. And it's been an extraordinary journey. I love my profession. I love being able to see patients, also be so participatory in medical education. And I think that there's so many questions. Again, we go back to who am I? And our answers might change in the moment. And sometimes we really have to be in the role of mother or daughter or a physician or a clinician when we're sitting and seeing our patient. When we're talking with our wonderful mentees, we're there and present. And so I just feel so privileged to have had this journey. And some of the themes I think are being flexible. You might move, you might start a family, you might have a new position. Say yes. See where things lead you. Think that maybe there are people out there who can support you in mentorship and sponsorship. Be very present. I've always, since I was young, kind of thought that you work hard and you play hard. So be present for your team. And remember that we are a team. I always say medicine is a team sport. Being a family is a team sport. You have to lean in and celebrate it. Encourage people to try to take the next step. Show opportunities to others and it will come around. And I feel like that's been shown to me, and my goal now is just to continue to pay it forward. I think I'm one of the more senior people on this panel now, being almost 20 years out from graduating from medical school. And now that's what I love to do, to sponsor and mentor and support our young learners, trainees, junior faculty to find and kind of achieve what they want to do. But keep your eyes open, seize the day, look ahead and plan ahead. I think sometimes we think, okay, in 10 years I'll do this, and in 20 years I'll do this, but that needs a plan. And you have to be thinking about the steps to get you there, because you might not be ready for it yet. But if you haven't thought about it, you won't be there when your eyes are, kind of wide open. You're just like, oh, it's been 10 years and now I want to do this, but you haven't set the stage. And look out, there's many people around to be there to help you along the way. And I think in the principle of lots of the stories we've heard today is, this idea that is resonating within our nation right now of being an upstander. And I kind of would leave you with that is say something if something's not right. And I maybe with time I have felt more and more comfortable doing that. And I think that you can be kind but firm, and you can know what's right and what's wrong, and you can show your skills. And remember, how do we describe each other? And think about the words we use for women and the words we use for men, and use those same words we use for men for women. And that's how we can really support each other in how we verbally communicate, how we use our written communications, but be an upstander for whatever you see around you. And thank you again. I think I'm going to wind up because I know there's probably some questions out there, and people want to be able to chat a little bit. So thank you, Kavita, for inviting me and letting me share some of my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Rupal. That was wonderful. And I might add, I got a chance to know Rupal before her career springboarded. She was a few years younger than me. We were both HPMEs, and she happened to be in the same class as my sister, my younger sister. And so I think of Rupal not only as assistant dean of admissions and whatnot, but sometimes I think of her as my little sister, actually. And so I'm so proud to see her here. Really, really proud. I had to get that in there, Rupal. I want to start by posing a few questions that we have from our viewers. And I'll start with this. Now, many of you have alluded to the answer to this question, but I was hoping we could do this in a rapid fire way, and perhaps please expand if there's any one particular skill set that you feel was really instrumental. So we know that these gender disparities exist in medicine, especially at the highest levels. And you've each met with tremendous success. If you were to point to a specific skill set that was vital to your success as a woman in medicine, what would that be? And how do you continue to cultivate that skill set? And if there are multiple skill sets, please, we'd love to hear more.
I can start saying a few things. I think one of the skill sets that for me is this idea of being vocal and sharing your voice and your ideas. I think that we can sit in a lot of meetings on teams, and when we share our thoughts and our reflections, people notice. People ask you to participate more, and it just really spirals to having more and more opportunity. And I think that's something that as women, maybe we do less. There might be implicit biases in terms of us being called upon, but we can raise our hand and we can just start to share our voice. So I know you wanted to do rapid fire, but I would say that is we have a lot to share and to share it, to open up.
I just can quickly add, I think for me, it's been being adaptable. So reading the environment and the people I'm around and figuring out how to best approach people and situations. I think that that's maybe one thing that women, that we are clued into people's emotions maybe a little bit more, and using that to my advantage, and carrying the reputation of being easy to work with. And I think that is often one of the first things people would say about me, and that often meant that I didn't meet as much resistance as other people in the same situations. So I think being adaptable is really important.
I totally agree with adaptability and just being open to change. So if somebody wants to change something, being open to it and putting yourself out there, volunteering for a lot of things, because as one of our speakers said earlier, that's how you're going to meet more people and make more connections. So for me, I think those three, and also like passion for your job. So if I always try to do a good job, and I always try to give the patients my best face forward, and I think eventually it will show to everyone that you love what you do and that you do a good job, and you will be recognized for it.
I would agree. I think these are all great things that will definitely help along the way. I think, what I found was with being vocal, it was always important that the message you had resonated with your audience. So understanding the place that they're coming from, what really drives them and motivates them, so that your message can go a longer way. A lot of times I rely on data to help with some of that messaging or to share ideas, which can help support and elevate the conversation a little bit more as well.
Thank you. Some of you had alluded to important mentors in your life. And I hope that you could expand a little bit more on this topic of mentorship, and specifically, what did those conversations look like? For those of us in the audience who, in our audience who might be just embarking on their careers, what are the practical tips that you might have in terms of seeking out a mentor? Who is it that you approach for mentorship? And as now a mentor yourself, what is it that you're looking for from a mentee? What are the expectations of that relationship, not only for the mentor, but also for the mentee? And are those conversations formal conversations? Are they informal conversations? How do you collect these mentors over the course of your career?
Okay, I can start with that if you want. For me, I started out with a male mentor who is my godfather, who's a surgeon, and he was the one that first empowered me. That had nothing to do with my ability to be successful. Sorry, now my 3-year-old daughter is here. I had a mentor throughout medical school who was also a surgeon, and she and I would swap stories about experiences I was having in the operating room with people. And she would really sit there and not only listen to me and empathize with me, she would share different things that she had experienced and how she had handled things, either in a way that she was proud of or maybe she wasn't, in a way to help guide me throughout my experiences. Sorry, my 3-year-old. In terms of my training, though, that was a little bit harder for me. I don't know about some of the other women, what you can speak to, but I found it a lot more difficult once I actually entered my residency to find good mentorship. I felt that a lot of my attendings seemed very overworked and stressed, and mentorship was not a priority for many of them. Maybe some of that's because I trained in New York, and life in New York is hard, and practicing in New York is hard. But I felt that it took a lot more work for me to find people who wanted to mentor me or had the time or the patience. And again, I felt that mentorship could mean a lot of different things. So, somebody I went to for the specific area I wanted to specialize in versus somebody who just understood what academia was like, women who were mothers. But I do feel like I had to work at it a lot more as I was in my training to find people who wanted to take and spend that time. So ultimately, persistence was really important. If finding a mentor is important to you, you may just have to work really hard at it. But ultimately, I think that if I hadn't persistently bothered people, I may not have actually ended up in the situation I am now. It was definitely because of advice I had received. But I think persistence, unfortunately for me, was really the key. And really finding people whom I could seek very specific type of advice from. So like I said, I didn't find one mentor who was by all, could answer every single question and concern or help guide me, but it was many people who I knew I could go to for very specific reasons.
Haley, I love what you said there because I think it's spot on. There's so many different types of mentorship, whether it's developing your clinical skill set and finding someone that has those interests and has done research or has gone into academia. And then it's really, other mentors that you can look for even outside of the industry. If you're looking to really get a better understanding of what might be happening in different elements of healthcare in different countries and different sectors, I think that's a great way to think about how it can impact you as well. And I think, the mentorship piece, a lot of it for me, I think you had mentioned this earlier, one of our panelists, is it was a lot for my mother as well, in multiple different ways. It was in regards to how do you juggle and manage raising children and working, but as I think a lot of us have seen, but also at the same time, how do you manage having a good relationship with your partner? How do you continue to push forward? I think it's finding that group of women or men that can be your mentors along the way based on your interests. So I absolutely agree. I think it's multiple different people.
Let's see. Oh, Hazel, do you want to go?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I kind of echo what we've heard already, and I feel I've spoken about a few mentors already, but I've had multiple mentors along the way, men and women, and some have been informal, some have been through very formal roles of a research mentor, an academic mentor. One of my most meaningful experiences was a professional mentorship role that was something that I applied for. And the first few times I was rejected, and I kept going, and finally I had it, and was a year-long mentorship program, which was pivotal in my kind of early years of training, and then moving on into kind of a junior faculty role. I agree that I think one of the flip sides of now being maybe on the more mentoring side is that we want our mentees to come with what they want from the relationship. And I think having some questions, not necessarily just having a general conversation, it can potentially be that way, but really what do you want to get out of that relationship? Because there will be different abilities and skills that a particular mentor can support you with. So that's usually how I'll start a conversation. Like, so what do you want to get out of this? How can I help you achieve your whatever you're working on? Is it in the professional domain? Is it in the personal domain? And that person might even helping to formulate what that is. Sometimes you don't know what you're looking for yet, but getting there. And I do think you have to be persistent. I think that people are busy, and it's not that they don't want to, but it might be that you are only able to get 15 to 20 minutes of someone's time. Well, that can be incredibly valuable time if you are able to be strategic and think ahead of what you want to get out of that experience.
The only thing I would add, for my job, I usually come into a team, and if I'm the newest person, I ask my colleagues, and usually it's by word of mouth that I find a mentor. And usually they would tell me, oh, Dr. So-and-so is really good, he or she will help you. So that's usually how I find them. When I was in school, it's usually my professors, because, it shows if someone is, has the time to nurture you. And the only advice I would say is, because these people are very busy, and they're giving you, their time to have goals and like specific things that you need their help with. And so it's more productive, like Dr. Kundu said, even if it's just for 5 to 10 minutes, if you have specific questions that they can help you with, it will be more productive.
I did want to add one other thing. I know we talked about sponsorship as well, and just so that we can think through the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, I think with sponsorship, it's being very vocal about where you're looking to move in your career. These are people that can really help support and drive you through the organization, right? And I think Dr. Kundu said it earlier as well. It's be vocal about that role that you're looking to go after so that those sponsors are aware and they know those interests. And when an opportunity comes up, they'll be able to support you in engaging and reaching those goals.
Thank you, Prem, for making that important distinction. I think that is a very valuable distinction that can actually serve our audience members well. Many of you alluded to this next question, or the answer to the next question, but I hope we can just speak a little bit more deliberately about this. And that is about how each of you navigates work-life balance and what strategies you employ to navigate that balance in the most healthful way. And specifically, do you have any suggestions for mental wellness? And the second part of the question has to do specifically with the time of COVID. We know that gender disparities and traditional roles have put on the shoulders of women a greater burden as they are traditionally assumed to take on those responsibilities. And in the absence of the usual mechanisms, the usual village that we rely upon, are there strategies, are there tools that you all are employing to care for not only those around us, but also then to have to juggle the increased needs of our patients at this time?
I have so many thoughts about this, and I'll just share a few. First, it's hard. Every day is different. I think that as a professional mother, make so many micro decisions in a day. It's like hard to even like contemplate that. And often I go to bed saying tomorrow is a new day. And I think giving ourselves a little flexibility and liberty to say it's okay. Like today was a rough day and tomorrow's a new day. But trying to think about the balance is a lot about leaning in. I think it's, if for me and my family, a few things that have been instrumental in COVID for me is the Peloton, but finding 3 to 4 times a week where I can exercise. And to be honest, prior to COVID, I was exercising once a week. It's been amazing that I've been able to do this and try to continue to make it a priority, and it makes me feel good. My PCP is very happy, and there's a lot of secondary benefits. And then there are a lot of hours of work. I feel that with COVID, I've been working harder, longer in general with everything, and so making sure that there is some firm family time. For us, that's been dinner time around a family show that we watch together, that everyone looks forward to. I'm sure I'll be watching something after this lovely panel later today. And making sure then again, I kind of keep going back to being vocal and saying that when you do need help at home or at work, that you can acknowledge that, and it's okay to look for help in so many ways. It could be emotional and mental, spiritual, financial. I mean, there's just so much going on with your health, but know that there are a lot of levels of support that are available, and I think you have to be a little vulnerable to request that, but they're there, and I think it is a time for us to come together and celebrate that village again.
I would add, I think COVID's definitely turned everything upside down in this work-life balance. And I will say, I have the opportunity to work from home. And that has been a constant battle of knowing when to turn off versus turn on. I think I've worked longer hours and days during this COVID period than I ever have, even being in the clinic and, you know, being on call and things like that. So it's kind of interesting because as you think about how you can really try to compartmentalize your day and your time, I think that helps with making sure that you don't let work bleed past a certain hour, if you have the ability to do that. And I try to get creative with the kids and exercise. I try to combine it with doing bike rides now. And it's how do we keep them get them tired so at the end of the day they'll go to bed earlier, hopefully, and you can have some peace and quiet. And you're getting exercise at the same time, right? So I think it's just finding some creative options and then making sure you've got that village. I mean, we have a nanny and then a backup to that nanny, and then, you know, lucky enough to have grandparents around to support if we need that. So I think just thinking through exactly what is that support you need and making sure you can try to help with having time for yourself as well.
For me, this has certainly been a very interesting time to be balancing work life. Delivering my second child during the time of COVID has been, needless to say, not exactly what I expected. I'll be very blunt. Going to work 9-10 months pregnant and balancing a full clinic split between in-person visits, televisits, having, you know, several hours of charting to do at the end of that, and then worrying about spending time with my 3-year-old before she went to bed for fear of delivering my next child and having her feel like she's, you know, playing second fiddle. It's been a very stressful few months. And then obviously dealing with like the physical changes of being pregnant, and I'd come home and my feet were so swollen that I could not wear any shoes, let alone there was no sandals that could fit my feet by the end of the day. And where do you find time for yourself, your partner? I definitely do not pretend to be an expert on that. I will say that we try to take advantage of being outside. So in the mornings, we go for a walk, or sometimes in the evenings, just somehow being outside in and of itself is just more calming than being inside a house with a toddler and a newborn. I think talking about it and finding people or spaces where you can just vent and feel no judgment is very important, and probably more of a woman thing anyways. And I embrace that. I don't hide it. I think for me, especially trying to keep up a certain appearance while at work, and then dealing with how that then affects me by the time I get home, and that kind of level of just mental exhaustion of trying to, I don't know, be that positive, always on person while, like I said, managing being pregnant. It was just very much a challenge. I think in terms of COVID, you know, we kept our daughter home she was in full-time daycare before COVID, and we kept her home during my last trimester for fear of me getting sick. But once we had the baby, I think my daughter was at her wit's end with us. She could not handle being at home with us either. And so we had to make a very difficult decision to send her back to daycare for all of our sanity. And I think it's a very personal decision that everyone has to make, you know, what's right for their family. But I think for us, my daughter just was not thriving necessarily in being her best self, being at home, and my husband working from home full time and me trying to balance. And so, you know, we had to make that tough decision. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, the only way that I've been able to have any sanity is speaking up when I need sleep and somebody else needs to take over. And I need an hour, and, you know, getting physically out of the house by any means possible.
For me, it's buying plants. So basically, I just had to find a new hobby. I really love traveling, but obviously in COVID, you can't travel. So I started getting into plants. And so after, my work, I also work from home. Well, I worked inpatient for 2 months. So they reassigned me from clinic to inpatient. And then when that was done, I was back working from home, 100% of the time. And then eventually it was 50% of the time. So, just like Prem said, just like setting boundaries when it's time to log off, and then I can go to my hobby. And then recently we took a vacation. So we were supposed to get married, but we couldn't. But I had a time off, and I was like, I'm exhausted, even though I know, other people are going through more things than me. I need a break, from working. And so we took a week off and we drove to Colorado and we went hiking. And so that's how I cope. I guess you just have to know what you like. And just, if you can make it happen, just make it happen, even if it's just for a day. If obviously if you have children, it's different. But if you can get away, then just get away and take that time.
I'll add one comment to all the wonderful suggestions that everyone had here. And I'll say that I think sometimes realigning our own expectations can be really helpful, and perhaps reducing our expectations, because we all tend to have a lot of ambitious goals for ourselves in every sphere of our lives. Is a technique that I've found throughout my life has been really helpful in terms of just trying to manage work-life balance. And but at the same time, I would say that, and I'll give you a concrete example of that. In residency, I was pursuing residency in New York, and my husband was in residency here in Chicago. And we would fly back and forth to be with one another. And I remember, especially when my husband was doing his gynae oncology rotation here in Chicago, I would fly here literally to spend perhaps about 6 hours of time with my husband, actually having, being half awake, because he was, really post-call working, even on call, post-call, and also on service, working 36 hours, coming home, and he'd say, no, come, come visit. And just being with your spouse for that moment, as opposed to, aiming to have a, wonderful dinner or a romantic, evening together, was an example of, that need to just sort of shift expectations. However, I will also say that at the same time of realigning expectations, I think someone pointed to this earlier, having a firm understanding of the expectations that you have of your partner, should you have a partner in your life, is also, I think, a very, very, very important element to being a successful woman in medicine, because this is a partnership that not only exists in a workplace, but it exists in terms of the home as well. And to be to realign expectations with regards to traditional gender roles, I personally believe is so important. And nowhere along the way did I ever realign my expectations that my partner also take full responsibility with every task and role at home, regardless of what that was, whether it had to do with chores around the house or whether it had to do with childcare. It's always been something that's been an expectation equally to have that joint partnership in the task of the home. So I definitely agree with everything everyone has said here. Seizing the day and just enjoying and living in the moment, I think, are also something that are really helpful for work-life balance. We've got just a couple minutes, I'm seeing, before our call concludes. Does anyone want to share some parting words? Well, I want to thank everyone for this amazing conversation. It's been a real pleasure getting to know each of you, and I'm hopeful that that's how our audience feels as well, to learn a little bit more about each of your arcs of your career, but also to hear some personal vignettes and your path to being the amazing women in medicine that you are. So thank you, everyone, for so eagerly participating today, and thank you to everyone who has tuned in. We look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. You say bye.
Bye.
Aw.
Thank you.
I loved having your cameo.